Regardless of who was president, the United States would have attacked Iran at this point in time. The timing was not accidental. While the official reason, Iran's nuclear development, is the standard justification the U.S. uses for military action, the real motivations run much deeper. Here is a breakdown of what the U.S. actually wants to achieve. For the U.S., wars are not just about security. They also sustain the U.S. economy and reinforce its global dominance. Understanding this is key to understanding the attack on Iran. First, look at the timing of the attack. Why did the U.S. strike at the beginning of 2026? Understanding this is key to seeing the bigger game. Iran was at its weakest point in decades, both internally and externally. The fall of Syria was a major blow to Iran. Syria served as the central hub of Iran's regional strategy, not just as a base for its proxy groups, but as a vital land corridor running from Iran through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon, used to supply weapons to Hezbollah. Iran had built military bases, missile infrastructure, and training centers in Syria. When Syria fell, Iran lost all of this, severely weakening its axis of resistance across the entire region. Throughout late 2025 and early 2026, Iran was dealing with serious domestic unrest and economic strain. The U.S. saw this as an opportunity for a quick, decisive strike, similar to how it picked off Venezuela's leadership without launching a full-scale war. The U.S. hoped to turn the situation in its favor by exploiting Iran's vulnerabilities at its lowest point, a moment Washington had long been waiting for. Russia, which could have supported Iran, was still deeply involved in its own conflict and lacked the military capacity or political will to intervene. China, Iran's largest oil buyer, was dealing with domestic economic pressures and was unlikely to risk a military confrontation that could destabilize its trade relationships. The U.S. calculated that neither power would meaningfully interfere. The U.S. had long planned to deal with Iran before any potential conflict with China, as a war with Iran could have drained America's missile defense stocks by overwhelming them with cheap drones. Striking Iran sooner rather than later was therefore a calculated decision. It gave the U.S. time to replenish any weapons expended in the conflict and preserve its stockpile of advanced interceptors, THAAD and SM-3, for a potential future confrontation with China in the Pacific. So to be fully prepared for a potential confrontation with China by 2027, the U.S. needed to close the Iran chapter as early as 2026. So now let us discuss what the U.S. actually wants to gain from the war with Iran. The Middle East holds nearly 50% of the world's proven oil reserves, of which Iran alone accounts for around 35%. The U.S. does not directly own Gulf oil, but it controls it indirectly through military bases, security guarantees, dollar-based oil trade, weapons sales, and political alliances. Beyond oil reserves, the U.S. wants full control over the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes. Keeping the Persian Gulf under Western-aligned security rather than under Iranian or Chinese influence is a core pillar of U.S. strategy in the region. The U.S. wants Middle Eastern countries to connect their air defense systems into a single integrated network, often called the Middle East Air Defense System. With Iran weakened, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE would feel less need to seek security support from China or Russia and more inclined to rely on the U.S. The result would be a U.S.-led security umbrella covering the entire region, with Washington as the permanent military protector. The strikes allowed the U.S. to prove that its stealth bombers, the B-21 and B-2, along with advanced electronic jamming technology, can completely neutralize even Russia's most sophisticated air defense systems like the S-400. This sends a clear message to both Russia and China. Your best defensive technology cannot stop us. It also restores the fear and credibility of U.S. air power, which many felt had declined after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. In short, the attack on Iran was not simply a reaction to nuclear concerns. It was a calculated, long-planned move to weaken a key adversary, secure energy resources and trade routes, lock in regional alliances, and position the U.S. for future competition with China, all while Iran was at its most vulnerable.